Chapter 2, Section 4, Fighting for Independence. At the war's start, the Patriots' prospects were not promising. Britain had a professional, well-trained army of about 40,000 soldiers. It also employed 30,000 German mercenaries, professional soldiers for hire. The Continental Army, on the other hand, was constantly short of soldiers. General Washington seldom had more than 20,000 troops at one time. He had to supplement his regular troops with militia forces. Many of them would fight for a while and then go home to take care of their farms and families. The Americans get off to a shaky start. In the summer of 1776, it looked as if Britain might force a quick end to the war. Soon after the Declaration of Independence was signed, the British massed their forces for an attack on New York City. Washington's army tried to hold them off, but the outnumbered, inexperienced Americans were no match for the British professionals. Suffering heavy losses, the Continental Army was forced to retreat. The battle for New York City was the first of many American losses in the weeks that followed. Time and again, the Americans had to pull back as British forces pursued them out of New York, through New Jersey, and across the Delaware River into Pennsylvania. By December 1776, Congress had fled Philadelphia in despair. Many of Washington's troops had gone home. Of the few thousand who were left, many were weak and ill. But Washington would not give up. Instead, he planned a surprise attack on German mercenaries wintering in Trenton, New Jersey. Late on December 25th, about 4,000 Americans crossed the ice-choked Delaware River to march on Trenton. There, they took the 1,400-man force of Germans by surprise. The mercenaries surrendered after only a brief fight. A week later, the Americans defeated a British force at Princeton, New Jersey. Nathanael Greene, one of Washington's most trusted officers, wrote modestly to Thomas Paine, "The two late actions at Trenton and Princeton have put a very different face upon affairs." Indeed, the two victories gave Americans hope that the cause of liberty was not dead. Military strategies evolve. As the war continued, military leaders on both sides developed new strategies. After his losses around New York, Washington avoided large battles that could put his army at risk. He fought a defensive war by trying to wear out the British rather than soundly defeat them. The new British strategy was to cut New England off from the rest of the colonies by taking control of New York's Hudson River Valley. To do this, Britain sent General John Burgoyne with about 8,000 men south from Canada to Albany, New York. Burgoyne's troops were supposed to join up there with a second British column of about 2,000 men sent to Albany from the west. Victory at Saratoga brings foreign assistance. Burgoyne's march was dogged by problems. The army's route crossed rugged terrain, and the heavily laden troops had to chop down trees, build bridges, and lay out log roads through swamps. Along the way, there were several battles with militias. When the British reached Saratoga Springs, 30 miles north of Albany, militia troops were there to meet them. Meanwhile, British reinforcements from New York had failed to arrive. Finding himself surrounded, Burgoyne surrendered on October 17, 1777. This decisive American victory in the Battle of Saratoga was a major turning point in the Revolution. Until then, the Americans had fought alone. The defeat of Burgoyne encouraged France to enter the war against the British. French support became critical to the Revolution's success. Washington's army winters at Valley Forge. In the winter of 1777-78, the British still occupied Philadelphia. Washington and his army made camp nearby Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. During that harsh winter, about one-fourth of Washington's troops, 2,500 men, died from disease and exposure. Still, Washington held his ragtag army together and continued to train them for battle. When the British abandoned Philadelphia to return to New York City, Washington's forces were ready. In June 1778, they attacked the British at Monmouth, New Jersey. The battle was an American victory, and the British escaped to New York. This was the last major clash in the North. The war shifts to the South. Having stalled in the North, the British turned to the South. In December 1778, they captured the key port of Savannah, Georgia, and gained control over the Carolinas, but they did not keep their grip for long. Wherever they went, the British were harried by American troops fighting in a style that later came to be called guerrilla warfare. Such fighting features small, mobile groups of soldiers who attack swiftly and then shrink back into the landscape. The South, with its tangle of deep woods and swampy terrain, was perfect for guerrilla forces. The most successful of these fighters was Francis Marion, known as a swamp fox. His band of guerrillas frustrated the British by attacking without warning and quickly fading back into the swamps. Meanwhile, regular American forces in the South engaged the British. After a long season of battles, Lord Charles Cornwallis, the British commander, brought his troops to Yorktown, Virginia. In the fall of 1781, American troops converged on Yorktown, joined by French soldiers and naval forces. In total, more than 16,000 troops surrounded the 8,000-man British Army. The Battle of Yorktown began on October 6th and lasted about 2 weeks. On October 19th, 1781, Cornwallis surrendered. The war ends. Yorktown was the last battle of the war, but it took Britain several months to accept defeat. Peace talks began in Paris in 1782, and in September 1783, Americans had British representatives sign the Treaty of Paris, ending the war. In this treaty, Britain recognized American independence. It also gave up its claims to all lands between the Atlantic coast and the Mississippi River, from Canada south to Florida. Victory had come at a great cost. At least 6,500 Americans were killed in combat, while another 10,000 died from disease. An additional 8,500 died as British prisoners. Even so, most Americans savored their victory and looked forward to healing the nation's wounds. That was a big challenge in itself, but Americans faced an even larger and more daunting task: to begin creating a society that embodied the ideals of liberty, equality, and opportunity set forth in the Declaration of Independence. As a first step, they would struggle with the practical issues of forming a government based on the consent of the governed.